Okay. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here. So as mentioned, we're going to be looking at grammar in this session, and we're going to look specifically at these three concepts here. So the first concept we'll be looking at is this idea of form, meaning, and use as being different aspects or components of grammar study or grammar teaching. We'll also talk about scaffolding, which is not just related to grammar. Scaffolding, I think, is a good practice for any kind of teaching that we do, but we'll look at it specifically in terms of how we scaffold grammar teaching. And then also we're going to look at this idea of backwards design. Backwards design is also something that's not just related to grammar. In fact, we'll talk briefly about some other areas of life where we can apply backwards design. But I think it's especially helpful when designing grammar lessons. So before we really get into it, I was hoping that you all could complete this sentence. You can do so in the chat, or you can raise your hand to speak. Teaching grammar is like, this will give me a feeling for how you all feel about teaching grammar. If you find it positive, negative, interesting, boring. Oh, it's like a walk in the park. Okay, that's pretty positive. Sounds like it's easy and pleasant for Kari. I wonder if everyone feels that way. Go ahead, Amali.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Mina.
Hi.
Now, about teaching grammar, from my own perspective, I think teaching grammar as a teacher is wonderful. Now, the problem comes with the learners now, because sometimes, when you're teaching grammar, you'll tend to be, let's say, let me use these words in quotes, very serious. Like you're just talking about the serious things, the rules, what they're supposed to do, no stories in quotes. So I find it good from my own point of view, but to the learners, it's a little bit difficult to them somehow.
So you have a very serious approach to teaching grammar, sounds like.
Yeah, somehow. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so that sounds different than what Kari is saying. Kari says it's like a walk in the park, so she must have a different approach. Interesting. All right, Josiah, go ahead.
Yeah, so good evening, everyone, and how are you? I think I would say teaching grammar is like unfolding a puzzle. It's like every time I'm teaching, I'm solving something new for them. It's a puzzle. I'm unfolding something new to them. Though might be exciting, but mostly they're learning something new and they have to work on it. I think it's exciting anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I like that analogy. It's like unfolding a puzzle. And so as we put these little details in, we get a big picture. I like that. Very nice. I see some other interesting things here in the chat. Let's see here. It's a serious affair. Teaching grammar is prescriptive. That's something I did not include in this, Leonard, but you're right. We have the difference between prescriptive and descriptive grammar. And teaching grammar is like using a hoe on very stubborn soil. Okay, that's quite an image there. So very different than a walk in the park or unfolding a puzzle. Teaching grammar is like building an art design. So we have some creativity, it sounds like, in Sammy's approach to grammar. Oh, this is very revealing, very interesting. So what I can see here is that we have different attitudes and different approaches to teaching grammar, which makes sense. We are different people. I'm sure that we all have different teaching styles. We have different backgrounds. We have different teaching contexts. And so this makes sense. I will say my approach to teaching grammar has changed over the years. When I first began teaching, it was I would say a more serious and very analytical approach. And teaching grammar was almost like teaching math, a lot of formulas and things like that. But as I developed as a teacher and learned more about language acquisition and learning, my approach changed a bit. All right, so we're going to start off looking at this. This is the kind of trifecta of form, meaning, and use. So when we're talking about grammar, we can examine grammar or teach grammar or understand grammar from these three different perspectives. So maybe this is like fitting a puzzle together here. Teaching is like chewing a hard substance. Be careful. You could break your teeth if you're not careful. All right, so form, when we're talking about form, we're talking about the rules of grammar. So these would be kind of formulas. This is a focus on accuracy. And I think that if we look in a textbook, this is a lot of what we see. So for example, if we're teaching the past tense, we are talking about, we have subject plus verb, and we add ed if it's a regular verb. So this is something we might put up on the board for our learners, and something that we might then practice and then test to see if they can form past tense verbs. But of course, grammar also has meaning. Often when we think of meaning, we think of vocabulary, of course, but grammar has meaning too. It has an intended message. If we use grammar incorrectly or we make mistakes with the form, our message may not be clear, or we may send the wrong message. So for example, if we're talking about the past tense, it means that an action has already occurred and it is finished. So for example, if I say I ate lunch, it means lunch is finished. I'm already done. It happened in the past. I'm not still eating lunch. It's finished. And then we also have to think about use. What kind of situations the grammar is used in. So this brings some pragmatics in. We know what it means, but when or why do we use this form? Of course, we use it to talk about things that are already finished, but we might also think about other ways that we use it. For example, the past tense is extremely common in storytelling. If you read a book, most of the sentences will be in the past tense because that is how a story is told. Or if I ask you to tell me about an important day in your life, you will tell me about the past tense. So it's very common for things like that. It has other uses as well. The past tense is used to increase distance, so and to become more formal. I could ask you, do you want to go get some coffee with me? And that would be in the present tense. But to be even more formal and create a little more distance, I would change it to the past and say, did you want to get some coffee with me? And so we might notice it's used for that too. It's also used in things like reported speech. If we're reporting something in the present that was said in the present tense, we'll switch to the past tense. For example, if I say your homework is due tomorrow, and somebody turns and says, what did the teacher say? The other student might say, oh, she said the homework was due tomorrow. So they'll change it to the past tense. Another example here with the passive voice, the passive structure. The form of the passive structure is the verb, is the subject, plus we need some form of the be verb, and then the past participle, also called verb 3. So for example, it was found. This is the passive voice. And then we also often see it with a by phrase on the end, but its basic form is this. And so this can be very tricky for students. It's got a lot of parts to it. The meaning is also important. It means that the subject was passive, not active. So if I say the cat was chased by the mouse, that's very different than the cat chased the mouse. The meaning is quite different. I've seen many lessons on the passive voice, and teachers usually just cover these two aspects. They cover the form and the meaning, but they very rarely talk about the use, which I think is important because why would we use the passive? It's a kind of difficult structure. Well, we have definite reasons for it. Sometimes we use the passive voice when we don't know who did the action. For example, if I say my bike was stolen, I might choose the passive because I don't know who stole my bike. So I can say the bike was stolen. It's also used to emphasize something, not the person who did it. So for example, if I say that mangoes are grown in Kenya, my focus is on the mangoes, not on the people who grow the mangoes. We can also use the passive voice to avoid responsibility. So if somebody came in and said, what happened to my lunch? I left my lunch here. And I say, I don't know, it was eaten. So now I don't have to take any responsibility for who ate the lunch. Actually, there's a famous example of this. In, I think, the 70s in the US, we had a president named President Nixon, and he was not a very popular president. And I think he's the only president in US history to resign, because if he didn't resign, he was going to be fired. And in his speech, he said, mistakes were made. He did not say, I made mistakes. He said mistakes were made. So he could avoid responsibility for the mistakes. So passive voice has, all grammar structures have all of these components. Sometimes the use is very obvious. Sometimes it's very general, or sometimes like with the here with the passive voice, it's something that's very specific. So I have a question, or 3 questions actually. You can answer in the chat. You could answer by raising your hand, and you can answer all the questions, or you can just choose one. I'm curious which one you think is easiest to teach, form, meaning, or use. Which one is easiest to understand? So if you're a learner or a student, which one is most clear? And then in your classrooms, which one do you spend the most time teaching? So feel free to answer in the chat or by raising your hand and speaking. And you don't have to answer all 3. You can just choose one if you like. Go ahead, Amali.
Yeah, thank you. Now, in my own perspective, I think teaching form can be a little bit easier because here you just have to, let's say, tell the students about the rules. For example, the past tense rules you have told us, you add ed to a verb to make it past, and of course, tell them some of the irregular verbs, and of course, they know. Now, the problem is when you come to use and meaning, because sometimes what you want to say might not necessarily mean the same thing with the students. So sometimes I think when you come to use, you'll have to put more emphasis on that and be very specific with your message so that you can take the message home.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I would totally agree with you. And I think you made some good points there. It's very clear. Mitrine, go ahead. And you are muted. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Muted, sorry.
Go
I'm
ahead.
saying, me, I teach in boys' school, and I would say with boys, grammar is quite difficult. All of them are quite difficult because they just feel grammar is just another vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you teach use, form, or meaning, they just find it difficult. But if I can compare the 3, I would say form is quite easy compared to use and meaning, because there they can cram boys, they don't tend to understand so much compared to girls. So of the three, I would go for form.
So
Yeah, with
agreeing
my
with
boys.
Amali. Ah,
Yeah.
okay. So
Mm,
a difference between them.
yeah. Girls easily understand grammar compared to boys. Boys find it like it's a vocabulary. Like if you look at the performance in my class, boys would score A's in sciences, but in English, they would not get anything. And mostly if you bring it down to grammar, they find it to be a little bit technical.
It is. I think that's a good word for it. Yeah, I think form is technical. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matrine.
Okay.
In the chat, we have some interesting things. Nancy says use, and form. Maida says, I find meaning easier to teach. Oh. Eunice finds use easier to teach, like Nancy. Maida goes on to say, I find form a little difficult to teach because it requires understanding the concept. Yeah, that kind of technical aspect. Irene is agreeing with Matrine and Imali, finding form easier. Oh, but Fancy finds it the hardest. But Mercy finds, so we have a lot of different perspectives, and Kelvo finds use easier. Josiah, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Hi, everyone. Though teaching is more, it's easier. I find, okay, I find it interesting to teach meaning. I'm in a mixed school, and where we have both girls and boys. And the way my colleague said, boys try to shy away from language, grammar, especially when they feel like it is another vocabulary introducing. They feel they're comparing the two. And I don't know that they find it so cryptic, but eventually, because having both gender, it's easier, in fact, interesting when you start the meaning, the class will contribute, and later you have now the meaning, and all of them now. I'm not saying that all girls are better in language, but boys just find it. I don't know what's. They try to run away from it, but eventually I keep teaching meaning. Thank you.
Thank you, Josiah. Some interesting differences between teaching boys and teaching girls I hadn't really thought of. I've never taught them separately, so I don't think I had an opportunity to really think about the difference. Oh, thank you. That's very interesting. So it sounds like we have a number of different perspectives here. And I think, again, so we have different perspectives depending on who our students are, girls, boys. Also, it may matter if we're working with beginners as opposed to higher levels or older students as well. Personally, I find form easiest to teach because it's very straightforward. Even if we don't fully understand it, it's something we can look at the rules in a book. And if students are good at memorizing, then they may find it easy. Some students are not good at memorizing. If they're not good at memorizing, then form can be very tricky because it is something that we have to memorize. And there's a clear right answer and a clear wrong answer. Whereas with meaning or use, we have some flexibility. There's many ways to be correct with meaning and use. I also find that students who are better at learning through like speaking and listening tend to do better with meaning and form, whereas students who like kind of reading and are students who learn best through reading and writing tend to be better at form, whereas students who tend to learn through speaking and listening tend to do better with use and meaning. But who can say? I will say I used to spend most of my time teaching form because it's the kind of thing we see most often on tests. But as I changed over time, I started giving a lot more attention to meaning and use because they are the most important for communication and actually using language. All right, so it is now your turn. I have some suggested topics here, the simple present tense, the present perfect, the first conditional, or the third conditional, but you are not limited to these. You may choose something else if you like. I'm going to put you in breakout rooms and give you some time to talk with your group. If you're teaching a certain grammar point, whichever grammar point you choose, what do you think learners need to know about the form, the meaning, and how we use it? So in your group, I suggest first choosing a grammar point that you all feel comfortable with. You can choose again one of these, or you can choose something else, and then discussing the form, the meaning, and use. I think form will be easiest to come up with since that has a clear-cut answer. But in terms of meaning or use, that might be kind of a more interesting conversation. So let me create these breakout rooms. Okay, I have it set so there's about 3 or 4 people per room, and I'm going to give about 5 minutes for discussion so that hopefully you have enough time. And I will follow last week's suggestion. I'll alert you to the time in the chat as well. And you'll be able to see this slide on in your breakout room. All right, I think we've got everybody back from the breakout rooms. Does anyone want to volunteer to share what was discussed in your room? You can use the chat, or of course you can raise your hand to speak. What grammar did you talk about? You don't have to tell us about form. I think we all know form, but in terms of meaning or use, if you have anything interesting. Go ahead, Molly.
Yeah, thank you, Mina. Now, we were in group 1 and we were only 2 members, me and Austin. Austin and I, actually.
Little
yes.
group.
And now, about form on the simple present tense, form is just about the rules. Actually, we don't need to talk more about that because you just have to tell the students about how to form simple present tense. You just have to add an S to verbs, and then you make it a simple present tense. The same thing with the present perfect. You need to add have before a verb. For example, they have arrived, something like that. Now, on use and meaning, that's where the main thing is. On use, we said about the simple present tense, we can use it when writing essays, expository essays. So when you're writing essays, it's always recommended that you use the simple present tense. And then on present perfect tense, it's used to show an action that has just been completed. And then about the conditional clauses, you just need to add on, again on form, you just need to add if. Of course, when you see something that begins with if, you know that is a condition. That's about form.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Other groups? Similar conclusions? Molly kind of touched base on all the ones that are here, but other groups may have come up with different things to say, different aspects of meaning or use, or maybe they chose different grammar points. Or maybe they just talked about how teaching grammar can be challenging. When I'm doing simple present, something I often do with learners is routines. We often use simple present to talk about our routines. I always wake up at 7. I always eat breakfast at blah, blah, blah. I usually do this, something like that. Descriptions as well. So I think when Amali says often we use simple present in essays, yeah, we do a lot of describing, talking about regular things. With present perfect, I think, so definitely true about meaning, and we might use it to talk about our experiences as well. If we want to know if someone has visited somewhere or tried something. Oh, sorry, Metrine. It's okay if you did not finish your discussion, if you want to share what you did get to talk about.
We were just trying to discuss on the first conditional. And we just looked at the definition, maybe because we were trying to check. I was like, I'm seeing it for the first time, but we were just agreeing that it's part of our Form 3 syllabus on the conditional clauses. So we said when we deal with the first conditional, it's something that is used to express the future consequences of a realistic possibility, which can happen now or in the future. And then we looked at an example of a sentence and we said, if I miss the train, I'll take the next one. Or another example, if it's sunny, we'll go to the park. So the form if gives a condition, if this happen, if this does not happen, this will happen. So we were just trying to look at the form use and meaning. We were just about to agree on what is the form, what is the use, what is the meaning. Then I was just logged out. So I don't know if my group members were able to finish on that. We're just trying to construct some 2 sentences. And then we wanted to agree on the form, use, and meaning, but we were unable to.
Well, I think you gave some good examples there, and I would even go, I don't know if it's a step further. So your examples are great. And I would say that those are examples of making plans, right? If you and a friend are making plans, oh, what should we do this weekend? Well, if it rains, let's go see a movie. But if the weather is good, we'll go to the beach, right? So I think it's often used for that. Actually, the first conditional I think is so interesting. We use it for so many things. We might use it to negotiate with someone. So if you help me, I'll help you. If you take me to school today, I'll buy you a coffee. We also use it for threats. If you don't finish your homework, you are going to fail this class. So we use it for, I think, a lot of interesting different things. I'm glad your group tackled that. Thanks, Metrine.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to share what they discussed in their groups? We're all very shy this evening. Go ahead, Josiah. You are muted, Josiah. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. There you go.
Sorry. If I was with Irene and Patricia in group 6, room 6. The time we ran out of time, but we were starting the sentence number. I've read that book.
So you'll come with our menu tomorrow?
Yes, we
I think I've brought
look
ingredients.
at the form. The form, so the words which part the falling in, what is the student? They would know the types of words. Is it noun, pronoun, verb, and so forth. Then instead, we could also go further and make the students make sentences elaborating the meaning of those words and the meaning of the sentence itself, then where to use it. So we never exhausted everything. I think the time was a bit short, but tried. So thank you very much. That's what I have.
Thank you, Josiah. Yeah, I think you're right.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No problem. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I do apologize. You probably just got into the meat of talking about it when I cut time. But yeah, the present perfect is very different, or very, I think, interesting. It's actually something that's changing in English. It used to be used a lot more, and it's declining in use. I did my master's thesis on it. It's very interesting tense, I think. All right, moving on. Okay, so this is one thing to think about when we're teaching, making sure that we're covering all of these bases, not focusing just on form, but making sure, of course, students know the meaning, but also how it's used in real life. So the next concept we're going to look at is scaffolding, and we see scaffolding right there. We see this building. Without scaffolding, we cannot go higher. Scaffolding is the support that allows us to build. But of course, we don't keep the scaffolding. When this building is complete, when it's strong enough, the scaffolding will be removed and it will stand on its own. So this is the same with our learners. We provide support and structure so that we can help build them up so that they can be independent users of language. But we cannot just say, okay, this is the grammar, now go out in the world and use it. No, we need to scaffold them and build them up. So there's several things we can talk about when we talk about scaffolding. One of these is called gradual release of responsibility. So gradual release of responsibility is kind of pushing our learners away from us and making them dependent on themselves. Because we know that in the beginning, students are very reliant on the teacher. They don't want to do things alone. They're scared. So we call this, one way to look at this is called I do, we do, you do. So first, I, the teacher, do it. I show the students this is how you do it. Then we, the teacher and the class, we do it together. And then after that, then you or the students do it alone. So this is from a teacher's perspective. From a student's perspective, they have the same idea. The student says, show me, and the teacher shows the students. Then the student says, help me. I can't do it by myself, so help me do it. And then finally, the student says, let me. I can do it by myself. So these are two different perspectives of this same idea, this gradual release of responsibility. At first, the teacher does everything. Then the class does it together, and finally the student does it alone. They have full responsibility. So we can see this in how a class is structured. Often the teacher will model first. This is how you do it. Then maybe the class works together. So maybe the teacher says, okay, this is how we make the present perfect. Now class, I want to turn this sentence into present perfect. How would we do this? And so the class is working together. Right, so first the teacher gives an example, then the teacher asks the class to help and all work together. Now the teacher is ready to turn it over to the students. Okay, work with your group or work with your partner. And then finally, students work alone, just like in a test. There's no group tests or pair work and tests. Ultimately, students need to be able to do the work alone, but we want to scaffold them up little by little. So we scaffold through kind of the group work, class work, pair work, but we also scaffold in terms of what kinds of tasks, exercises, or activities we have students doing. So one way to look at this is we begin with controlled practice, then we move on to less controlled practice, and then finally we move up to free production. So in controlled practice, students have very little choice in what to do in how to complete the exercise or the task. And this is done intentionally so that they can focus on the target language. So this would be an example of controlled practice. Students are studying the comparative, and so they're going to complete the blank. There's really no choice. They just have this one small space that they have to fill. There's only one right answer. They don't have many choices. And that way they can just focus on the form of the comparative. And hopefully they will create sentences. The house is smaller than the hospital. My sister is taller than my brother. So this is controlled practice. The teacher or the exercise has a lot of control. The student has very little freedom. It's very focused. So this is an example of a written form. But controlled practice can happen with speaking too. So let's imagine this would be like a chain drill. So the teacher says a sentence, for example, here, every day I walk to school, and then the students have to change the sentence to the past. So the teacher says, every day I walk to school. The next student says, yesterday I walked to school. The teacher says, every day I play soccer. The next student says, yesterday I played soccer. The teacher says, every day I watch TV. The next student says, yesterday I watched TV. So again, there's very little choice in this. There's not much to think about. The student just has to change every day to yesterday, and they need to add ed to the verb. So there's no real communication here. It's a very rote drill, but it's allowing the student to focus on form. This is controlled practice. Once students have shown that they can do this and be successful with it, it's time for less controlled practice. So now students have a little bit more freedom. They're still focusing on form, but they can begin to look at meaning and use a little bit more. So here's a written exercise, again, looking at the comparative tense, but they have a little more choice here. They're not just forming the comparative form, they also have to decide which adjective they want to put there. Some of the adjectives don't make any sense. For example, if I say the house is louder than the hospital, that doesn't make any sense. It's correct form, but the meaning is weird. But there are some different choices. Maybe the house is smaller than the hospital. Maybe the house is nicer than the hospital. The house is really nice and the hospital is not very nice. Number 2 has many possible answers. My sister is shorter. My sister is faster. My sister is smarter. Lots of different choices. Yes, exactly, Isaac. Is the house faster? So here we have not just form, but also students have to think a little bit about meaning as well. And so that's why it is less controlled practice. They have a little bit more freedom here. Again, we can do this with spoken practice as well. It doesn't have to just be paper-based. So let's imagine the teacher says, okay, here's some questions on the board. Take turns answering these questions with your partner. Use the comparative form. So the student says, what's heavier, a cat or a cow? And then the student has to answer, a cow is heavier than a cat. So here they still have to focus on form and they have to create the sentence, but they have to make meaning. If a student says a cat is heavier than a cow, that shows me that even though they can use the form, they don't understand the meaning. Or maybe it's a really big cat and a really small cow, but that doesn't seem very likely. It is an odd adjective. So here, the control is given in the form of the question. The students aren't just comparing anything they want. The questions are up on the board, which things to compare. And so they're practicing asking and answering. Again, they have a little bit more freedom, but they don't have complete freedom here. They are able to focus on both form and a little bit on meaning. Once students have shown that they can do that, they're ready to move on to free production. Free production is basically speaking. It's using language in a real way to communicate thoughts or ideas. In the previous exercises, they're not really very meaningful sentences. Maybe my brother is not shorter than my sister, who knows? It doesn't really matter about my own personal situation. It's just about the sentence. But with free production, we begin making real meaning. So we're trying to connect students through their own ideas, their own experiences, something like that, and using language to authentically communicate about themselves. So here's an example. The assignment is use 5 comparative sentences and tell your partner, or you could change this, write a short paragraph, make a poster, give a short talk, whichever form the teacher wants. Use 5 comparative sentences to talk about one of the topics below. So there's some choice here. Students could talk about their family, friends, animals, places, fruits and vegetables. They get to choose, and then they get to choose who or what they talk about. So if they want to talk about their family, they might say, my sister is younger than my brother. My father is taller than my mother. My mother is more beautiful than my father, whatever they want to say. It's up to them. They're using the target grammar that we've given them, but they have freedom in what they want to say, what they want to communicate, and they can make it meaningful. This can be done through speaking, this can be done through writing, this can just be done with partners, it can be done in front of the class, whatever the teacher decides is the best way to do this. Okay, your turn. I have 3 activities. One is a controlled practice, one is a less controlled practice, and one is a free production. And you will decide which order they go in. The images are in the WhatsApp, but I'll show you them first. So number 1, we have this worksheet here. Students have to complete the sentences with appropriate time expressions. And notice that this is using since and for. This is a lesson about since and for. It says number 1 here, but it doesn't mean it's number 1. You will decide if it's controlled practice, less controlled practice, or free production. The second exercise here, the teacher tells the students to write 5 interview questions about how long someone has done something, and then they will walk around and interview each other. So they might ask, how long have you lived in your house? How long have you played soccer? Questions like this. So students are going to write interview questions, and then they are going to interview a partner about these things. So we want to find out, is this controlled, less controlled, or free production? And then finally, the third exercise here, the teacher passes out a worksheet, and students have to complete these sentences with since or for, and put that in these blanks. So these 3 exercises are also in the WhatsApp, but I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. Again, I'll give you 5 minutes in the breakout rooms, and you're going to decide which one is the controlled activity, which one is the less controlled, and going from there. I've recreated your rooms a little bit so you'll have some different people in there. So Amalia, it won't just be you and Austin by yourselves. All right, I'll go ahead and open the rooms. You'll be able to see this, but also look on your phone in the WhatsApp group and you'll see the 3 exercises, and you'll decide which is controlled, which is less controlled, and which is free production. Okay, I'll see you in 5 minutes. Hi, Eunice, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, Mina, how are you?
Good, how are you? Would you like to share your answers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was
Go
in a
ahead.
group with Macau, Nancy, and I. So we discussed, and this is what we came up with.
Okay.
Yeah, the first question was, I think it was #1 or it was A. Now the first, yes, I see it here.
Mhm.
#3 was controlled. #3,
Good.
it was controlled because the student is not given that freedom to choose between many options. #2 pre-production, because here a learner is to investigate or to find out what to write. So the learner is free to choose which words to use where. And the last one is, yes, C #1. It was less control. That is what we came up with.
Excellent
the learner
job.
Find out, then write using their own words. Okay, thank you. That is what we find out. We found out.
Excellent. That was perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eunice. Yes, I feel like on the next page I have. Okay, so this is controlled practice, as Eunice told us. They only need to decide between since and for. There are no other choices in this exercise, just either since or for. In the less controlled practice, they have some more decisions to make. Since and for are already provided, but they have to decide which time period to put in. And so especially towards the end, they have many choices. It just has to be of a certain type. There is still a right answer and a wrong answer, but there are many right answers. And then finally, as Eunice told us, the free production was this. Students are going to create their own questions, and then they're going to go around and ask each other. So they're using the language in an authentic way to make real meaning, to talk about either their own ideas, their own experiences, something like this. And the free production is usually also how we really use language in real life. How do we use since and for in real life? Usually somebody asks us a question. How long have you lived here? How long have you been working here? How long have you been a teacher? How long have you been married? And when we answer these questions, this is when we tend to use since and for. So we have the answers, so we don't need to hear from each group. But if anybody wants to share any difficulties or challenges or anything they noticed while they are doing this, please feel free to share.
Hi, Mina.
Hi, go ahead.
I think we just have different category of students, and we are one of them. We seem to have gotten a completely different answer from what you've just discussed, and it's good to come in so that you can know that you're also dealing with different kind of students. I think our understanding was quite different because we said that #1 is controlled. Are you able to get me?
Yes, I have it up right here.
I think we just understood you differently. We said #1 is controlled because we have to give accurate answers. Maybe we didn't understand the lesson well, and that happens in a class. We have sharp, average, slow learners, so you will categorize our group. So we looked at some of the questions, like one, I moved to this city. We have to be specific on the city that we moved to. I have been in this city since. We have to give a specific time. Then it is the year. We have to give the exact year. So we said it is controlled because the answers are specific. Then we move to #2, where teacher tells the students to write 5 interview. How long have you lived in your house? Or how long have you known the teacher? So we said we'll use words like I've known her for about, you are not so sure. So again, we are controlling you, you are not giving us the exact words. So we settled for #2 to be less controlled. And then finally, #3, underline, there has been snow on the ground. So we were looking at this scaffolding that you are giving us. Now we said in control 1, we have taught the students. #2, we are letting them, but not completely. Then #3, now we have taught them. We categorize #3 to be a free production because now we want to see what we have taught. If they have been understanding, then the kind of answers that they will give us will show us if they have understood the lesson, or I don't know. That was our argument.
So Metrine, everything you have said makes sense. I
Yeah.
think you did a good job of clarifying. Everything you said makes sense to me, and I can't disagree with any of your explanations. I would just frame it differently. So this being number 3 here being a controlled practice because the choices are so limited. They have a 50-50 chance of being correct here because their only choice is since or for. There's no other choice in this. In this less controlled activity, they have more choice. So if we look at number 2, I moved to this city. If I say I moved to this city, I can say yesterday, last year, 1999. We have many choices there. After we made that choice, then it's true that after we make that choice, then we have less choices for, if I say I moved to this city yesterday, then for the next one, I have been in this city since yesterday. I only have one choice, but there's some choice here. And depending on that, that determines everything else. And then finally, these 2 questions here are just examples. Students can make any kind of how long questions they like. How long have you worn glasses? How long have you been in the football club? And so they have a lot of freedom in the questions that they form. And then it's true when they ask the questions to each other, students don't have so much freedom, but they are using the language in a real and authentic way to communicate their own responses. Everybody's response is going to be a little bit different depending on themselves. So there's no right answer or wrong answer that's the same for everyone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
I want to thank you for being brave and not just pretending that, oh, yes, that's our answer. I really like that you explained that you had different answers and then you explained why, because it helps me to clarify and it's probably helpful for other people too. So thank you.
Thank you.
So while we were doing this, some of you may have noticed that there's some kind of similarities to other things we've talked about. So the first concept we looked at today was this form, meaning, and use. In controlled practice, the focus is mostly on form. In the less controlled practice, we begin to bring meaning in it. And then in free production, we're using the language in a way that we really do use it in real life. Those of you who study different kinds of lesson planning might have also noticed that this also aligns with PPP lesson planning. In PPP, we first present the lesson, then we practice and we produce. In the practice, we have controlled and less controlled practice. And then finally, free production is where students kind of freely and authentically produce the language. So we have kind of these ties here. I also want to point out that in a perfect world, we move up and we have no problems. But in real life, we don't always move up. Sometimes we move up and then we realize, oh, actually, my students can't do the less controlled practice. They're making all kinds of mistakes. So we need to go back and do more controlled practice. Only after they've shown that they can do it, then we can move on. Just like this building, if this layer down here is weak and we keep building, this building will collapse. In order for us to keep building up, we need to make sure that each layer is strong and solid. All right, finally, we're going to look at backwards design. Backwards design is where we look at our goal first, and then we move backwards from there. So our goal is our objective. What do we want students to be able to do? And if we want students to be able to do this, well, what needs to happen here? And if we want students to do this, what needs to happen here? And so we're designing, oops, I'm going backwards. And so we're going backwards to plan out a lesson, starting with the goal and moving backwards. So for example, if my goal, students will be able to make comparisons about aspects of everyday life. I want them to be able to compare their family members, for example. Well, if I want my students to be able to do that, then they need to be able to make comparative structures. They need to be able to make this sentence, my father is taller than my mother. If they can't make this sentence structure, then they can't make comparisons about their real life. And they can't do this if they don't know how to form comparative adjectives. So they need to know that big is bigger, beautiful is more beautiful. And so that means that this is where I need to start teaching. And once they can do this, then they can do this. Once they can do this, then they can do this. So this is backwards design. To do successful backwards design means that we have to be very clear and very intentional. What do we want the final result to be? If we're not sure what the final result should be, then it's very hard for us to plan this way. I like using this, SWABET, students will be able to, because it helps to focus on what the students are doing instead of what the teacher is doing. And so we want to think about what we can reasonably expect the students to do. We don't want to have any unreasonable expectations. Oh, good. I'm glad that's helpful to you, Isaac. I find it very helpful. The other important thing about this is that the objective needs to be clear. Otherwise, how will we know that the students have reached the objective? So here we have two objectives. One says the students will be able to understand how to use the simple present. And the second one says students will be able to use the simple present to talk about their daily routine. So these are both objectives that deal with the simple present, but one of them is a well-written objective and one of them is not. The first one, students will be able to understand how to use the simple present, is not really a good objective. I want students to be able to understand how to use the simple present, but I want them, first of all, I want them to do more than understand. I want them to be able to use it, not just understand it. And also, I can't really be sure if they understand it unless I have them do something else. The second objective, students will be able to use the simple present to talk about their daily routine. Now my students are doing something. They're not just something up here, they're actually doing something. And I can know if they did it because I can hear them talking. I can listen and I can say, these students can talk about their routines. Or I might listen and say, this student cannot talk about his or her routine. She or he doesn't know how to use this tense. So having a nice specific and measurable objective can really help with this. Backwards design is not just about language teaching. It has many other uses. It's a great tool for life. For example, if I want to buy a car and that's my goal, well, what do I need to do to buy a car? Well, I need to save a certain amount of money a month. Well, how am I going to save that money? That means I need to stop spending money on, I don't know, clothing or I don't know, something else. Or maybe I want to lose weight. If I want to lose 5 kilograms, how am I going to do that? Well, I need to cut out 500 calories a day. Well, how am I going to do that? Stop buying sweets. If I have sweets in my house, I will eat them. Actually, a friend of mine is a child therapist, and she recently was posting on Facebook. It's summertime in the US, and many teachers are going on vacation and their kids are on vacation. So she was saying how at the end of every summer, she always thinks she's going to feel relaxed, but instead at the end of every summer, she feels tired and she's not ready to go back to school. So she suggests she writes a letter to herself and she imagines that she had a wonderful summer and she writes about how she feels at the end of the summer. And so then after she looks at that letter and she makes it her goal, and then she backwards designs and thinks about what she has to do in the summer to make sure she feels that way at the end of the summer. It is a nice idea for buying a car. Sometimes it's not easy to do though. Same thing with losing weight. All right. So I'm hoping that you'll share a takeaway with us. Either some kind of question you still have, some kind of comment that you found. Maybe you found something confusing or helpful, or I don't know, maybe you have a concern, something that you think maybe would work, but you're not sure. Please feel free to share in the chat or to raise your hand and talk to us. Go ahead, Matrine.
I wanted to ask about the first conditional and the third conditional.
Mhm.
When we look at the first one, we were looking at the future and even now. And then when we look at the third one, it's about us being sorry for maybe what did not happen. Now, based on the two, do they take the same form, the same use, and maybe different meaning?
That's a great question. Yeah, they have a totally different form, but you are right on about the meanings. And I know not everybody uses these terms, first conditional and second conditional. So first conditional, if we go, we will have fun. I think you can all see this.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's first conditional, and third conditional, if we had gone, we would have had fun. So you're absolutely right. The third conditional is usually used to express regret, or that we're sorry. If we had gone, we would have had fun, but we didn't go. So yeah, they have very different form, and the third conditional's form is hard, I think, but it's an important one, I think. Good question. Thank you.
Okay.
Molly, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask about, now that we have learned about form, meaning, and use, now what is the best approach to use when you are teaching grammar? Should you begin from use, going to form, or you should begin with form and meaning? Which is the best way? Bearing in mind you are working with, let's say, I don't want to categorize them as slow learners, but learners who are still learning the language. You know, for us, for instance, for us, we are talking about English as a second language. So which is the best approach? Should we use form, meaning, and use, or we should use the backward design? Which one is the best one?
They go together, I think. I don't think we have to choose. So I would say that if we're looking at backwards design, use is our goal. And then we can go backwards to meaning, backwards to form. So if we want them, for example, to use the first conditional to make deals with each other. If you buy me a soda, I'll drive you home, something like this. If we want them to use it that way, well, they first need to be able to form it, right? And then if they can form it, then they can make it understand the meaning. And then if they can form it and understand the meaning, well, then they're ready to use it. So I think these things really go together. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, thank you. It does make sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I like the, not slow learners, learners who are still learning. That's a nice way to put it. In the chat, Mercy says, in an inclusive classroom, can you use controlled, less controlled, and free productions at the same time? You can if you are a very organized teacher. I find it hard to do, Mercy, because it's a lot of instruction and different groups doing different things. It is possible if you are very organized. I myself have trouble doing it. But you might have different groups working at different levels, and you might give them different tasks to do. It certainly is possible. It just requires a lot of organization. Oh, Lillian, I'm glad you like, Lillian and Irene like backwards design. Awesome. And Isaac, you like the scaffolding approach. Yeah. Referring to the previous level, I think is really important part of this, right? We want to know what their foundation is, what came before that. That's a great point. Awesome. All right, I'm going to leave a little time for Austin to make any announcements, but I did want to thank everybody for being here. And then you may have seen in the chat our topics for next month. Next month is all going to be all about writing. We had a writing month back in, I don't know, March, I think it was, way back when. Not everyone who's here now was with us then, but we're not duplicating any topics. We're just kind of building on. So we'll look at creative writing first, still in an academic setting in schools, but creative writing I think is very, very fun and important. Then we'll kind of build on that to look at personal essay, because a personal essay is a formal essay, but it uses a lot of aspects of creative writing. Then we'll move up to essay writing, and then finally looking at how we prepare our learners for research writing. So this is kind of a scaffolded approach as well. Austin, I heard that you had a maybe interesting meeting and might have maybe some interesting information to share with us.
Okay, thank you very much, Mina, for the session. I want to apologize, I came in a bit late, and also where I am, it's a bit noisy in the background, but I'll try to talk as fast as possible so that you people don't lose track of what I have to say. So first, I want to say that a number of us have registered for LPAC, which is quite encouraging, and there are some stuff that we're going to start rolling out with the fully paid members. So I just want to request us to continue registering, and we'll keep sharing the details of how you need to register. And secondly, I want to say that today we were meeting one of our bosses. She's called Diane. She's the one in charge of the Regional English Language Office. It is the office that organizes for these sessions. And I just want to say that there are a lot of good things that are going to come for us, and we look forward to engaging more. So I just want to let us know that we just need to register to LPAC, because there are so many opportunities. And interestingly, I cannot say all of them, because even as every day as officials, we keep getting surprises about the programs that are there. Secondly, I want to say that we also, a number of us attended Education USA. Mina, your students really represented you well at Education USA. And it was great. The impact is very powerful, and a number of us are already working with the team at Education USA. So what we are saying is that we have a lot of opportunities, and opportunities here are for everyone. So I just want us to make sure that we are fully registered, so that we can be able to help you guys also tap into these opportunities and see how you can grow yourself, your institutions, and the communities that you are part of. So Mina, also for us, from our end, we also have some good things for you, which I think we'll let you know as we continue. Yeah, so thank you very much. And then, for those who have joined us for the first time, I just want to let you know that this is a virtual English language session. It is organized by the US Department of State in coordination with RILO, under which Mina here, who is our virtual English language fellow, runs. And this is organized by, this is coordinated by LPAC. LPAC is English Language Professionals Association of Kenya. And we have been having a number of sessions. I believe this is our 22nd or 23rd session. And we should be ending all this at the end of July. So don't worry, even if you're joining us at this point, there's still a lot, and you'll still be able to learn much. Then, of course, apart from attending, we also provide certificates at the end of all these sessions. So we'll find a way how we can have a number of us get certificates for having been part of this session from the moment we started in March. So thank you very much, all of you, and back to you, Mina.
Thanks, Austin. I'm still curious, but I'm sure everything will be revealed in time.
We even have a name for you, Mina, an African name.
Well, tell me my name.
Not now.
Yeah, Mina, then I can allow one of the people who attended, just a volunteer who attended the Education USA to say something, and somebody who attended a session today with Rilo. So I'll allow Metrin to talk about our session today, and then Carrie Glory will be able to talk about our session with Education USA. At times it is better to hear from the teachers and not the same faces, Lina. Not the same faces, right, Lina?
Sounds good.
Yeah, so Metrin, you can share with us about today, just briefly, and then Carrie will share with us about the event we had with Education USA.
Okay, today was great. We were able to talk about so many things. We were impacted positively as teachers of English, and we discussed about so many opportunities, and we decided that we should be selfless and invite so many teachers to the forum. It was so good. We talked about projects, and now we are excited because in the next month we are going to be taught about writing, essay writing, personal writing, creative writing, and all that. So it's really going to have a lot of impact on us. And Mina, we missed you and we sent our greetings, and we hope they'll be there. Your name we have concealed. We'll tell you when you are here, when you are able to see you. And thank you so much. We appreciated you. And thank you, Austin, and to everyone else. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Metrine.
Carrie, are you able to say something, Carrie? Okay, Isaac Mwangi. Isaac, you can share about Education USA.
Thank you, Austin. We had a wonderful session on Saturday, courtesy of Education USA. And it was also good to find LPAC members ably representing the forum. We managed to get to hear or learn more opportunities about, learning or studying in USA. So it equipped us as teachers, more so those who are in the careers, to advise the students on the best career paths, how to go about when they're applying, okay, and helping them actually, because now we know what it takes, or Jennifer was able to demystify, the process of applying to join USA as a student. So at least we are equipped to help even the learners and motivate them to win those scholarships. Besides that, we were able to learn on how members can group together or come together so that we are able to get these opportunities. It's a good networking forum, I would say, and helping ourselves in these aspects. Besides teaching, what else can you do to the community? How can you impact the community? And how would you help them? So all these were packaged, and we were glad to even have those certificates. So as Austin has said, opportunities are there for everyone. So it's us to actually avail ourselves and also network so that we can become better teachers who are able to impact on learners and also impact on the community. Thank you.
Yes, Mina. Now, Mina, you're able to hear. When teachers talk, they really communicate. Yeah, so Mina, thank you so much. So I'll give it back to you.
All right. Well, thank you all. Thanks for being here. And I'm really excited. You guys had such great meetings and networking, and I'm just really happy to be with this awesome group. I hope you all have a good evening and a good week, and I look forward to seeing you soon. And we'll talk about creative writing. Maybe I'll see some of you on Friday. EMCG is meeting on Friday to talk about poetry. So looking forward to that as well. Oh, wait, is it, no, books. We're talking about books on Friday with EMCG, and then in the schools conversation club next week, we'll be talking about poetry. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.